Okay, thank you everybody for choosing to attend this session this morning. I'm really excited to be able to talk to you. Just to quickly introduce myself, my name is Alex Torpey. I'm the mayor of South Orange. I'm also the emergency management coordinator for South Orange for OEM. And I've been doing volunteer EMS for a couple years and just finished my master's in emergency management and public administration. So this is a field that I'm particularly interested in as it applies to public policy and public administration. And so I'm going to walk you through just a couple different subject areas and a couple different ideas and thoughts, and then I want to really open it up and have a little bit more of a discussion. So I'm going to try and get through some of my points a little bit quicker. I'd love to know, so the folks in the room, how many of you work in local government? How many sort of citizen journalism, citizen advocacy? Any other fields? I just want to kind of get an understanding of where people are at. Emergency management, okay. So we have some other OEM folks here also? Urban planning. Excellent, okay. All right, good. So the first thing that I want to talk about, I'm just going to, again, go over a couple of these different subject areas, and then hopefully we can kind of open it up to some questions and have a little bit more of a discussion. So the first thing that is really important to think about when talking about emergency management and local planning is your communications infrastructure itself. So in this group, how many of you guys have a home phone line? And just keep your hands up for a second. How many of you are on Facebook? And just keep so if you kept your hand up the first time, just keep it up the second time. How many on Twitter? How many with the cell phone? So we've got almost everybody covering those different topics, and that's what I want to spend a moment talking about, is that, you know, from a municipal communication standpoint, you're not going to hit everybody with one type of communication, right? And that may seem kind of obvious, but there's a big challenge that we have in local OEM, which is that everybody used to rely on this reverse 911 system. So that's a system every phone company is required to provide local governments or county or state OEM with an emergency subscriber list of all the listed and unlisted phone numbers in any jurisdiction. So we have these lists that are provided by the phone companies and updated on a yearly basis for all the home phone numbers that are registered in whatever your government jurisdiction is. The problem is, these days, A, a lot of people don't have a home phone at all, and B, a lot of people have a fiber optic internet and cable connection. So how many of you have like Verizon Fios or anything like that? So when you got that set up, one of the things that they do is they come to your house and they install a battery in your basement or somewhere, right? And that's because the fiber optic internet, cable, TV line, all that requires power to be run. Unlike an old copper phone line, which has the power to power the device built into it, fiber optic does not. It needs a separate power source. So part of the problem with reverse 911, which used to be actually more effective than it is now, is that those home phone lines that used to be able to hit a dialer and it would call every single phone in your town, it would call again when no one picked up, and then it would leave a message if no one picked up that time, that's not that effective anymore. And you're going to leave out huge percentages of your population, especially younger generations that don't use, that use maybe an internet-based phone service or don't even have a home phone line at all. I know the only reason I have one really is because somehow it makes my internet cheaper to have a home phone line. But it's run through cable, it's not run through my phone line. So if the cable system goes down, my phone line goes down. And if you have fiber optic, if your power goes out, you get that 8 hours or 12 hours of battery backup, and then everything's dead. So during Hurricane Sandy, where a lot of towns like South Orange, we had about 80% of our town was without power, and the last person got restored about 2 weeks later. After the first day, that reverse 911 was not hitting anywhere near the number of houses that we were hoping it would. So you have to plan for outside of that. You can't rely on that technology anymore. So what's great is that most of these systems have been updated, and they now allow you, through things like Code Red or Everbridge, and there's a handful of other tools, to put in home phone numbers, cell phone numbers, social media, email, all these different ways you can communicate with someone. So when looking at your emergency operations plan in a local government, or when trying to talk to local officials about what you think they could be doing to do more for communication, it's really important to make sure that all the bases are covered. And one of the greatest things you can do, social media, as we heard a little bit from Justin before, is incredibly effective at not only getting information out to people, but also getting information back from people about what's going on. So when your local government sets up those social media platforms, it's really important to make sure that they have a way to get information out of those social media accounts. You can do it just kind of manually by checking a Facebook page or checking your Twitter account. There are also a lot of programs that will pull all the tweets or pull all the Facebook posts out of the social media account and into a database or a dashboard, and you can then view everything kind of uniformly. And so there are tools out there that are free that do that. There are some that are paid that do that. And basically, those are all built on what's called a CRM, or a customer or constituent relationship management software. So you want to make sure that you're collecting as much information as possible. And that's a major problem with like what a lot of the utility companies do, where they use social media for PR, but they don't actually collect any data over it, and they're really missing out on a huge opportunity. So if you're setting up social media in a local government, make sure that you're figuring out some way to get that information out of it. And on top of that, what you can also do is Twitter has a great feature where you can sign up on Twitter, put your cell phone number in. Twitter's free. You put your cell phone number in, and what you can do is mark certain accounts that when they post anything, when they tweet something, that it will send you a text message with that tweet in it. So the great thing about that, and we used this during Hurricane Irene and that snowstorm and during Sandy, and we saw people actually utilize this, was we encouraged residents to sign up on Twitter, even if they were never going to check Twitter, never going to go on it, never going to care about anything on it. Go on there. It takes 2 minutes to create a free account. Put your cell phone number in, check off that you want to get text updates from South Orange NJ on Twitter, and then every time we post on Twitter, they'll get a text message. And the great thing about that is that when you have a storm or any kind of incident where you have a lot of people using data networks, text messaging is still on the voice network. So anything below that 160 characters is actually not going through the data network on cell carriers. It's still going through the voice network. For most people and for most people's phones. So that means that even if there's a lot of traffic on the data networks, that person still may get a text message that could give them really important life-saving information. And you did all of that without spending any money. Twitter is free for the government to use, Twitter is free for the user to use, and all you're doing is getting the text messages. So there are some really easy workarounds like that that you can do to try and figure out a way to get information to people really quickly and free. So that's really important. And the other piece of it that's really important as well is making sure that the local government sets up the correct standard operating procedures for communicating to people. That is not an elected official using their political mailing list for emergency communications. And a lot of people think that that's the great thing to do, and you might have one council member or even a mayor or someone who's like, I'm going to get really go above and beyond. Some of them might even be well-intentioned. Some might not be. We had a council member in my town who's no longer a council member, but did an enormous amount of communication through his own political mailing list, did not direct anybody to any of the official emergency alert or notification systems. And that means that people are not getting, A, the information in the most timely fashion, and B, they have no guarantee of the accuracy of the information. So from doing EMS, one of the things that I learned, which you don't always see in politics, is that chain of command is really, really important, especially when you're out responding to an emergency, when you're trying to get information out. It doesn't matter what the group wants to do. It's not, that's not the time for committees. That's the time for getting information out quickly and accurately. And that means that there's got to be a central place where information comes from, and that everything has to flow into that and everything has to flow out of that. And sometimes it's hard to get political minds together to understand that, but it's really important because by sending out information, by getting people to rely on a communication medium that isn't guaranteed, there's no guarantee of the accuracy of the information, there's no redundancy. So if the guy, you lose your password to your MailChimp email list, then what? Whereas in town we have a handful of the police chief, the fire chief, myself, our deputy administrator, our IT, 2 people from IT, all these people have access to this email list. So if one person is out of town or you lose a password or my computer breaks or I lose my phone, someone else is there and they can get that information out. So we can guarantee the citizens that they'll get information always in a timely fashion. And so it's really important to get everybody on board with getting one place of information coming in and out and doing that through an official government means built on a system that is made for doing emergency communication, not for sort of political mailings. So that's really important all to think about as far as communication infrastructure goes. On the same vein, utilizing your local emergency planning council is really important. In every town, you have tons of people in your community who know a lot about a whole bunch of different areas of expertise. When we bring our full LEPC together, we have all of our department heads, we have community partners like Seton Hall University, like our school district. So we end up having 15 or 20 people in our meetings. And there are people who have expertise beyond what you'd even think sometimes. And these people could be department heads, they could be staff who work for public works, who work for your recreation department. For example, our recreation department is in South Orange is great. We have a few folks that are really good at just organizing, moving things around because they do so much of that for event support. So when it comes time for a storm and we've got to move cots, we've got to move supplies around, they know, the best way to do it. They know they're ready to go. They've all worked with each other, and so make sure you lean on those people. And sometimes, not everybody is included in those planning meetings. From the local government perspective, sometimes it might just be like, it's statutorily defined what the committee is, but it's really up to the people in charge at the time to actually use it the right way, and not everybody does. So make sure that if there are people in the community who have a certain amount of expertise, that they are being taken, that their expertise is being taken advantage of in those kind of settings, and make sure that everybody is being included in those LEPC meetings. This is a really important one. This is this is obviously a theme with the Citizens Campaign. This is what Justin was speaking about earlier. This is what actually kind of all the panels are about today. And this is really important because at the end of the day, there's a lot that we can do from the government perspective and from the local government perspective, but we definitely can't do everything. And some of the partners that we work with, I'll pick on utility companies a little bit because I think they could do a much better job than what they do, is they don't know where the power's out. They don't have, they're not the cable company, they don't have a two-way communication grid. So when your power goes out, they don't know your power's out. A lot of people don't know that. A lot of people think it's like your TV or your cable where if you just, you unplug your modem at home or you unplug your cable box, your cable company can tell, they can reset things and do diagnostics. The utility companies do not have that ability. The only way that they know your power's out is if you call and if you stay on hold and then you eventually let them know and it gets registered in their system. And sometimes that doesn't even do it. So at the end of the day, when you think about from the perspective of trying to understand what's happening in any given jurisdiction at any given time, the situational awareness, what's going on. Are the utility companies your best bet for getting information about where your power's out, or are the people whose power out the best place to get information about where the power is out? And they're obviously the best people because they know whether their power is not on, or whether it's on or not. And in fact, with PSE&G, and I would assume that most utility companies are the same way, the way their outage management systems work is that when you have two reasons that your power's out, for example, you have a transformer or a distribution station that goes down, and you have an individual service line down, so like a tree took down your power line and the transformer blew, they will only have that logged in the system as one outage, which is the top level, the highest level outage. So when they restore power to that network, that distribution grid or that transformer gets repaired, basically all the jobs get cleared out of their system. So even if you had an individual service outage and you reported it, but you also had a larger outage, once that larger one gets repaired, most of the time everything gets cleared out, and you're going to have to call again and report it. And so that's what happens if you ever have had this experience where you call the power company and what's the status? You say your power is back on, everything's fine, and you're sitting in a dark house. That's the reason why. So the people know that the power's out. So it's not getting that information. We already have the source of information. We just have to figure out how to get it to us. And so one of the things that folks did in South Orange, 100% on their own, without any impetus or anything from the local government, was to start a Google map keeping track of power outages. And this is something that people could keep track, could do a little bit from their phone. People were doing it from work we had like kind of public charging stations down at our Performing Arts Center and library and town hall and places like that, plus a lot of residents who just opened up their homes to people to come in and charge. So people started reporting where the outages were, and I started to be able to see, as our OEM coordinator, some of the patterns. And we actually passed that information along to PSE&G. And I think I remember the exact text of that email, which was, PSE&G, it seems like our residents can keep better track of this than you guys can. Here's a map of the power outages in South Orange. And it helps. Now, the utility companies are far behind in that they don't have a way to take that information and bring it into, they can't import, a database of outages into their system. That's something that we've been really pushing them to try and do, is be able to import, export information out of these management systems. But citizens know whether their power is on or off. And you can set up very easily a Google form that feeds every report into a database. And that's a pilot project that we're trying to start to work with Essex County OEM on, between South Orange and Essex OEM, which is setting up a Google form, which is really easy to do, free, and every entry into that gets fed into a database. And that database will have the required fields that the utility company needs to know what an outage is. And then we can take that information and at least give it all to them and say, you guys take it from here. And hopefully that will incentivize them to get their system where they can just import the information really easily. So that's a really, really important piece of all of this, because again, the citizens have the information not just about outages, but about where the damage is, where people might need rescuing, where there's extra gas, and things like that. The one caveat that I would say is that it's really important, and this is really hard to do, especially during these kind of events, is it's really important to set people's expectations about what you can do as a responding government. A lot of people think that as soon as they report something, it's going to get fixed. And it's really hard to tell someone that it's going to be a little while, when their power's out, when they have kids at home, when their elderly parent is staying with them, or anything like that. But the worst possible thing that I think is letting someone know that you're going to take care of something right away and then not following through on that. So the best thing to do, even though it may be hard at the time, is to let people know very candidly and honestly what's happening. And say, look, we are overloaded right now. We've got this many this and this many this, and this is really important. But I don't think, in my experience, people haven't been that upset when you tell them, look, we've got the senior citizen home that doesn't have power. We've got gas stations without power. We've got our police department that's running on backup power. People are kind of like, okay, like I understand that you have to do some type of triaging with how you respond to things. And as long as you explain to people what that is and why you're doing it, and that they are on the list and that they are not going to be missed, I think that's people's biggest fear, is that they're going to be forgotten about during all of this. And if you're keeping track of everything, in the right databases, you won't forget about them. There's no way to do that. But people's experiences, with utility companies and others have been so bad that I think they think that everybody in government or anybody in the public sector is going to forget about them if they don't keep calling and keep calling, when really that just kind of ties up the system for everybody else. So as much as you want to use people and empower them, and whether it's the town setting up a local map, like a layer in a Google map, or whether it's just a citizen group setting that up and letting people know that they can use that and posting it on social media and having people start to report outages. There were people that were going outside, people that had power in their home, and they were reporting other people's outages. It wasn't just people like my power's out. People were trying to help each other. And you saw that at a certain point with like extension cords running across every street which way. People were sharing generators, which, just a side note from an emergency planning perspective, is a major problem if it snows and you have plows on the road. And it is actually really hard to get back to people when they've got extension cords running across the bottom of the road. Even you get 1 inch of snow and you can't see those extension cords, and you've got trucks with plows coming through, tearing people's generators and cords apart. And so that's a really tough one, to try and get the information back out to people quickly that, hey, we've got to plow these roads for emergency vehicles. You've got to unplug your neighbor's power right now. So, obviously, again, leveraging this is really important, but I think also setting expectations is really important. And as far as getting some of these things done, obviously political support, political feasibility is always like kind of the question that's in the back of my mind, right? Is like, well, can we actually do this? It doesn't matter how great the ideas are, but are we going to actually be able to get this done? And I'm very fortunate in South Orange that we have my department heads, my police chief, fire chief, the other OEM folks are really, people are on the same page about wanting to use more technology, wanting to streamline how we get things done. But it wasn't always like that, and actually with my prior council did not have a tremendous amount of support for doing these things. And it took a lot of getting citizens to help let them know that this is something that they wanted. So after Hurricane Sandy, we went out and I went with 2 council members, and we met with all the neighborhood associations one-on-one. We did online surveys. We posted a ton on our website to collect feedback. And from the surveys that we collected online and from meetings with a couple hundred residents over the course of a few weeks, got a really good sense of A, what people wanted and what they were frustrated about, but B, also letting them know that we needed their help in getting some of these things done. That it wasn't just, all of us against them, which sometimes people feel like sometimes, but it's actually us with them. And there are people, whether it's New Jersey Transit not getting information out. I should have brought, there's a great picture. South Orange is a very commuter-oriented town, and we have one of the busiest train stations on the 9th busiest on the entire New Jersey Transit line. The day after Hurricane Sandy, had a lot of folks who were trying to get to work. There was maybe 2 days later, the roads were, for the most part, pretty clear. We have a very unique situation in South Orange where actually all of our power lines are in our backyards. So on one hand, and that was done for aesthetics, 80, 90 years ago. So on one hand, it's a terrible thing because that means that for the utility companies, they have to come down people's driveway to fix every single individual service line that's out. You can't just run a bucket truck, and you can't bring those trucks into people's driveways. So you have to put a ladder up against the pole, climb up, and so the restoration for the individual service lines takes a lot longer than it does for other towns. But there's an enormous benefit too, which is that there are no power lines in any of the streets after a storm. So the night of Hurricane Sandy, our public works was out there, clearing pushing trees off to the side. And the next morning, about 98% of our road area was open. There were no dead ends blocked, and there was a couple trees still down that we were waiting for cranes for the county, for tree companies to come out. But every single house the next morning was accessible by emergency vehicles. So it's a double-edged sword that we kind of have to live with. And I like the idea as an emergency responder having access to pretty much everybody's house the next morning, even if it takes an extra couple days for power to get back on. But people went out to get to work the next day, and there was just a line all the way down South Orange Ave, all the way around, up the street, hundreds and hundreds of people waiting for one bus to get into New York City or Hoboken for work because the trains had stopped and they had not allocated any extra buses. And so there was not communication happening. So for a lot of the times, it's sitting down with our residents saying, my work was open. They were expecting me to be there. Which is kind of a whole different story. But New Jersey Transit, they were like, they didn't tell us. Where was the planning? Where was the communication? So a lot of times it's us sitting down with them and helping be their ally to a larger county or state or federal organization. If they're not getting reimbursements back from FEMA or anything like that, so going out and talking to them and letting them know that we're trying to work through some of these same things really helps build a relationship with the citizens. That means that they'll help us leverage change at a larger level when we need to. And that's really, really important to be able to do. And most people, that we've found, people were extremely willing to help each other. I've never seen anything like it. I love South Orange, Maplewood, South Orange is where I grew up, so I love the area. But during the storm, seeing what people were doing for each other, it's incredible. And people were coming out and donating food to the fire department and the DPW guys, and all that kind of stuff. And once you build those relationships a little bit, it makes it a lot easier to say, hey guys, we need to spend $12,000 on this new emergency notification system so that we can get out better information to you next time. We did a survey, X percent of you said that you didn't get enough information or that you wanted information in a different way. You all said this at our meetings. And then you get a couple people to come to your council meeting and say, hey, this is something we really want. And so sometimes you have to use that to actually get something, move something forward. And most citizens are happy to do that because they're actually getting to be, you're actually part of changing it. So switching gears just a tiny bit, one of the things that we've tried to do in town is hold as many exercises as possible. Now, from a local government standpoint, this is, I know we've got some OEM folks here. I mean, there is just no replacement for going out and actually doing a full-scale exercise, interfacing with other agencies, actually going out there and seeing what it's like. You can do tabletop exercises, which are much cheaper, where you're basically sitting down and you're going over what you would do, and then you go out to a full-scale exercise. And we've done 1 or 2 of those in South Orange. We do a lot between our EMS and fire just for kind of regular, extrication type drills and things like that. We did an active shooter drill at Seton Hall University between the county, our police, fire, EMS, and a couple other police agencies. And we found issues when we did that. Issues that, God forbid, we would find if we actually had to go out and do it, and we're able to start working on fixing those things. Full-scale exercises can be pretty expensive, especially when you start talking about bringing paid workers back in. Usually if you're bringing in police and fire, they're getting paid overtime for doing the exercise, but there are a lot of grants that are available for doing these exercises, especially if you get multiple jurisdictions to work together. So whenever we do anything like this, we always do it with Seton Hall. And if you have a college or university near you, or you have 2 towns that can do an exercise together, or anything like that, that increases the likelihood of you getting some grant funding to do your exercise astronomically, especially if you've got a private college or university, because they have grant writers there already, and they will help you write the grant. And most towns, especially towns the size of South Orange, we don't have that kind of in-house staff. So they know how to get that money. They know how to shake the money tree out, and working with them to do that is really, really helpful. And what you can do, every town needs to do exercises to continue to maintain kind of their good standing with their county and state OEM. And so you can turn events into exercises, which a lot of towns don't know. So if you're doing a big event or like a parade or anything like that, if you set it up and you activate a certain number of the components of your emergency operations plan or annexes of your emergency operations plan, which could include like a law enforcement section, an EMS section, a fire, and there's a whole bunch of others. If you activate enough of those, I think it's 4, you can qualify that event as an official exercise, and you get credit for it from your county OEM. And by doing that, you basically get all your responders to start using the radio the right way, which most people don't. People get kind of into habits when they're, especially the police and firefighters that are kind of using it every day. And it's different when you have multiple agencies responding. Some are better than others about using the correct hierarchies and incident command system all the time, and some are not. But it's a great way, if you're interested in getting your local government more prepared, and you go in and you want to talk to them and present about how they could get more prepared by turning an event into an official full-scale exercise, that puts them in better standing with the county OEM. That makes them more likely to get grant funding in the future. So there's a whole bunch of little things you can do like that that are kind of low overhead and low cost that will get the local government in a better place for the future of actually being able to run a really large exercise and practice some of the things that God forbid you won't have to use, but the way things have been going, you very well might. And it's also a lot of fun for the responders and the officials doing it. People almost always really enjoy doing these exercises. It brings people closer together. It gets people from different jurisdictions, across the police and fire lines, or from one town to another. It gets people working together, and you probably wouldn't run an exercise without finding something that's a deficiency that needs correcting. And that's really important to do before you actually need it. The one thing that's also important about this too is if you have a town where you have volunteer emergency services, whether it is a volunteer fire department or volunteer rescue squad, or you have a community emergency response team. How many people in here are familiar with CERT? Cool. So CERT is a great program. It stands for Community Emergency Response Team, and it is usually run through a local Office of Emergency Management, and it's run through FEMA from a federal level. And what CERT is a basic 20-hour class on some light search and rescue, some disaster medical operations and triaging, paperwork and documentation, which I'll talk about a little more in a second. And what you do is you do this 20-hour class, usually break it up into like 4 or 5 hour classes, and you cover a whole bunch of different aspects of if there's a major emergency right now, what can your average citizen do to be a part of that? And CERT kind of came out of California with basically the government in California, state and federal government, wanting to equip their employees to be able to respond when there are earthquakes, and be able to help evacuate buildings correctly, help move people out, help triage when professional rescuers got there, and things like that. So what CERT's great for is, A, it's a great way to just get people thinking about emergency management and get people thinking about planning. You know, part of the classes go around stocking your own kind of go bag at home where you keep some emergency supplies, and getting in the mindset for families to think about, well, what would we do if the power went out and we hear sirens outside and we check the internet and it's not connected? What are you going to do? And it's one of those situations that you try not to think about because it's a little frightening, but it is really important to think about, especially because we've become so reliant on technology, which can do amazing things for us. But if cell networks are down, which they came dangerously close to New Jersey after Sandy, where you had, I forgot what the percentage was of cell networks, of cell towers running on generators after Sandy, and there was a gas shortage. So that could very well equal all of that entire cell network closing down. They were pretty close to that happening. So if that happens, then what do? So having a little plan with your family is really important. And also empowering citizens to be able to take care of their own neighborhoods. For professional rescuers, so we're a town of about 16 or 17,000, plus if Seton Hall has got all their students in, it's another 10 or 12,000 people in town. We have about a 50-person police department, about a 35-person fire department, about a 30 or 40-person rescue squad. If people know or don't know, with most police departments, fire departments, people do not live anywhere near where they are doing it. We're really lucky in our town because we have a couple folks that their families have been multiple generations police and fire in town, so they actually still live in town, but a lot are coming from way down in South Jersey or an hour and a half away. Those people are not going to be able to get there quickly enough if there's a major incident. So what resources and assets do you have in your community, like not 24 hours a day, but a lot of the time, that you can utilize to come out if there's a major disaster and an impending storm, and you've got to get word out. So CERT is really great for that because the whole point is that it's people that live in the town, and it's also a great training to do and have all of your municipal employees trained in that. So your clerk's office, your tax offices, everything that happens in your municipal building, and there are some towns that are pretty good at that. And getting your employees trained on that, whether you want to, as a mayor, one of the things that I want to do is make sure we have all of our employees trained on that. And so what we're going to be able to do, and what you can offer to your local governments too, is basically let employees be paid while they're in the training. Get paid through the day and take a couple days out and do a CERT training. And so that's really, really easy to do. The training funds are paid for by the county and by the state OEM. If you don't have a CERT program active in your town, you can find one close enough that is, or you can contact me and I'll help you find one. And again, it's a great way to train people so that when something happens, someone can take care of their family, then they step outside and they can basically interview and triage their block. And then when the police get there, they say, well, we've got a 97-year-old lady here who's on a piece of medical equipment that needs power, and her family's unreachable. These houses are all fine. This person is a doctor, and you start to get people to think about understanding where your assets and resources are, and understanding how to report something when the fire department or police department or other first responders actually get to an emergency. So CERT is a really, really great thing if you don't have it. And you want to. So the last thing is paperwork, which I wouldn't say it's the thing I like least about government, but it's pretty high up there. A lot of paperwork and not enough of it electronically, but during an emergency and during a storm, there is absolutely no substitute for keeping incredible records. And it's nodding, yep. Because going back and trying to do that after the storm, A, could get you in some trouble if you're not really careful with the numbers, and B, a week later, how are you supposed to remember everything that happened? So one of the amazing things we get for Irene and for Sandy, we got 100% of the aid that we asked for from the federal government, is because I can almost say, I don't want to say solely, but in huge part to our public works director, who keeps amazing, amazing records during these storms of every hour spent of every employee on exactly what they were doing, every dollar spent to an outside vendor during the storm, that, well, we had to get this tree out, it was blocking access to this road, so we couldn't wait 7 days for this, we had to call an emergency one, which cost twice as much, but this is the reason why. The damage to public property, the damage to private property, all of these things are meticulously kept, and our fire department and DPW are really, really good at doing that. And if they didn't do that, we would not get the aid back from the government that we do. When they go over our paperwork, we've gotten comments back from our FEMA representatives. They're like blown away by it. They're like, this is like one of the most organized worksheets that we've ever seen for keeping track of all of your costs and all of your damages and all the extra equipment that you use. And the county OEMs try and get the towns to use certain proprietary systems that don't really work that well. But if you keep your own records straight, the best thing to do is just like do some spreadsheets and just start writing everything down. And if you have a few people who want to help out, for example, you've got a few citizens, residents who live in town, or you yourself are one and you want to contribute to helping, there's a way you could do that, whether it's like through a CERT kind of headline or some other volunteer mechanism that allows you to, at the end of the day, when the DPW guys come back and put the papers down they were collecting out there, for you to help type that back into a computer. That kind of stuff is just amazingly, amazingly helpful. And if you're interested in helping your local government do better with keeping track of these things, getting more aid and working more efficiently, one of the best things you can do is help find a way for them to keep better records and paperwork. So that's really, really, really important. So that's pretty much everything that I wanted to cover. This is one of my favorite quotes about planning. In preparing for battle, I have found that plans are useless, but planning is indispensable. This is Dwight Eisenhower. And so I would love to talk for a little bit. I know we're sort of running out of time, but I definitely want to have a conversation with you guys if you have any questions about anything specifically. So sort of open it up.
CERT program, is it open for public? Like, is it open for the residents?
CERT? Yeah, so the question is CERT open to anybody? It is. It's usually run out of a local OEM, and it is open to anybody who lives. In fact, you can have a person from another town be on your CERT program if there isn't one in their town. But it is open to anybody. And one of the really great things about CERT is that you can usually find a way for anybody to be involved in it. So if you might have some people that are, exceptionally, physical specimens of first responders, and can carry people by themselves up, down flights of stairs. You might have someone who's really good at keeping track of paperwork. And that's really, really important. And that's a role that CERT could play during a storm, is you could have a CERT person go out with your fire department, and their primary goal is to keep records and allow the firefighters to do what they need to do in the rescue operations. And there are definitely some places where you'll get a little bit of pushback about CERT because people don't always like, especially first responders and professional rescuers, don't always like non-professional responders kind of like in their business when they're doing it. But if you have someone, for example, with EMS, if I can have extra CERT people help carry someone on a backboard, so now we can have 6 people carrying someone on a backboard instead of 2, and I can take an EMT off that backboard and put them to doing triage with another area. That's an amazing value that person just added to the process. So you can run the programs. And if you want, I'm happy to give you more information after. But it's a great way to get like a lot of people bought into helping during these kind of things.
I figure that a bicycle might come here because it doesn't use gas and it could go fast again someone before.
That's true. A bicycle, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, it's amazing how kind of ill-prepared. I mean, you know, how many people. I mean, everyone knows the Ford Crown Victoria, right? The police car for how many decades, and now they don't make them anymore. Fortunately, they are horrible cars, and they are rear-wheel drive. And if you ever tried to drive one, even in the rain or in the snow, I mean, it's impossible. Even with chains on the tires, they're not great for getting around. Most ambulances are not four-wheel drive. So having alternative means of transportation, we made a decision actually after the snowstorm that I said no more, only vehicles we'll purchase in town now are all-wheel drive. All the police cars that we purchase now are all-wheel drive. So you know, we had a couple SUVs, but you know, in a couple years, once the cycle is complete, you know, every single vehicle will be four-wheel drive, and that makes a huge difference. So that's actually another thing that if you want to suggest, it doesn't cost that much more. Spend maybe a couple extra $1,000 on a new like police interceptor to make it, you know, from rear-wheel drive to all-wheel drive, and now that car can get around in the snow. So thinking about how you can get around, and bikes actually, we started a bicycle squad, our rescue squad for doing big events and stuff, because sometimes getting someone there as just a first responder with, you know, a jump bag with some medical supplies and oxygen, that could save somebody's life. We've actually had people, I don't want to say walk, they were running to calls before, and I've seen the same thing driving an ambulance in the snow. When you're driving down the street and after, it was after that crazy snowstorm in 2011, you know, we've got power lines down the street, you can't get the ambulance underneath, so we're running through the snow with the stretcher and the equipment, you know, a couple blocks down to get to the person. And so thinking about what you can do and that kind of stuff, and it's a great idea. If you've got a lot of police departments used to have bike squads and not a lot do anymore, that's also a really good way. The town could probably save money if they institute a bicycle program for the officers and go to their insurance company and talk about, you know, and do it as part of like a wellness and fit program. They could probably save a little bit of money on their premiums by doing that. So you could possibly cover the cost of the bikes and the equipment by the money you might save on the health insurance by encouraging employees to be more fit and active. That's a great idea. Charlie?
Yeah, thank you so much. This is really helpful information. I wanted to ask a question about a lot of towns in my county, Middlesex County, are using the Nixle emergency alert system. First of all, what's your opinion on that particular system, that product, how it can be used, and also what situations should it be used in and what shouldn't it be used in? Do you have clear policies for when you use your own emergency alert system?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Nixle is a really good resource. It should not be, in my personal opinion, I wouldn't use it as the only emergency notification system. Nixle is great because, is anybody, are people familiar with Nixle? So, you know, the nice thing about it is a shared database, right? Is you sign up with Nixle and you put your zip code in and it distributes you out to where you are and then allows the local governments access to that information based on the area. And they allow different tiers of access, you know, if you pay for it as a local government and things like that. So it's great because you'll get people that are signed up for it that wouldn't have signed up for your own emergency notification system. But at the end of the day, our emergency notification system, we have built-in recall for our employees. So we used to have our dispatchers at the fire and police desks call the employees one by one to get them out, and now it's all automated. With Everbridge, which is what we just switched to, you can actually take surveys over the phone, over those reverse 911 messages. So we can do two things with that. One is with the recall for employees, we could say press 1 if you're responding now, press 2 if you're not responding, press 3 if you're going to be delayed. And instantly within 2 minutes we've got, you know, information on what all of our employees are doing. And the second is that we can actually use it to collect outage information or collect any other information. Do you need shelter? Do you have special medical needs? Whatever. And you can, when that phone call goes out and the message ends, you can have the option of having someone press that information in, and not every system can do that. And so some of the other, you know, so we're layering. If I can get PSCG to give us the mapping information, which they've been very resistant to do, is put in a layer in our emergency notification system, the electrical grid. so that we can tell, because the grids don't really make any sense anywhere. They're all random, which streets are attached to which grid. But I'd love to know if we have a grid out, that means that the whole area is out, and I want to be able to push a notification out to just the people in that area. And so we can do that kind of like cutting and layering in Everbridge really easily, again, if they give us the information. So Nixl's great. I would use it as a secondary, personally, just because if you have your own system, you have a lot more control over what you can do with that information. But it is a really good resource because, like I said, people are going to be signed up in it that may not have signed up for your own system. So the best thing to do is to use both, because it's like the raising hands in the beginning. Each time you add another thing, and you're going to get more and more people. And if you can get to somewhere near 100%, that's an amazing thing. Yeah.
Community-based organizations are a great resource for volunteers. What role do they play in your area?
I'm really glad you brought that up. So community-based organizations, they're so important for two main reasons. One is like what you said for volunteers. We had a lot of houses of worship, especially, that have huge spaces open up as shelters. And even though we don't utilize them as a shelter resource, like in our emergency operations plans, we do use them when the storm does come and people are asking where to stay. We can say, well, this is open and this is open, and we have a shelter open. And usually theirs are actually better, to be honest. They usually have like food and coffee and stuff. And so they're a valuable resource. Any community-based organization like that that has any kind of space is really helpful. And on the other hand, the best thing that they could do, and I had it in my notes and I forgot to mention it before, is of getting the word out during the emergency. You can do phones and email chains and all that kind of stuff, but if you have point people, and what we're trying to do is collect all the email addresses of all the people that are in charge of a neighborhood organization, and put them in one specific email list of people that get kind of like priority updates that we can email a little bit more often than the average resident. And if you inform those people, the person that's the head of a church or synagogue, your neighborhood association, your neighborhood watch people, folks like that are really involved in the community, and you let them know what's going on, they will then take it and spread the message out to other people. So the best thing a local government can do, which very few of them do, and even for us, we're not doing as good of a job as we could, and hopefully we're getting better, is taking advantage of all of those groups to use them for getting information out when something is happening. And they are really good also, because you push that information out to them, and what you'll get back is a message from someone saying, we really appreciate it, here are the houses where we need help at. Because they know, that person knows the people who live in their neighborhood association. They know where people with special medical needs are, or senior citizens, or anybody like that. So they're really great. The two main things that I would say is one for facilities use, for sheltering, and or staging if you have to give out supplies or anything like that, but using their spaces. And then two is getting information out to them and help them and use them to get information back to you. And they are all really, really, really happy. As far as I've never had someone part of a group like that shy away from being really involved during a storm. They're the ones that are always texting saying, what can I do, what can I do, what can I do? And if you can give them something to do, say, okay, go out to your block and get information back to us about who needs help right now, or canvass your neighborhood and see how many people have power. Those kind of things are really, really helpful.
And can the community organizations be involved in meetings with Office of Emergency Management?
Yeah, you can definitely do that. And so we bring in, they may not be an official person on the committee, but what you could do really easily is take one of the municipal employees and that's part of emergency management, and give them kind of the responsibility of being a community outreach coordinator or something like that, and have that person be the kind of filter for which all the community organizations go through. So then that person, let's say it's your it's your police chief, and so that person is then going to go out. They're going to meet with the community group separately. They're going to bring information back, and then when you convene your OEM, and they're going to be taking that information with them. Because if you allow everybody in the one meeting, you'll end up having 100 people in the meeting, and nothing will get done. That 15 to 20 person size is usually pretty good. But if each of those people is a gateway to more organizations and they can bring that information back to the group, that's really, really helpful.
Alex, we're out of time.